Genie is a cloud-based software company and helps automate overtime HVAC requests. Our software physically plugs into the network of submeters and helps automate the reading of those submeters. And we also have access control. Our cloud-based solution physically plugs into your controllers and your readers and automates the adding or removing users, as well as now it enables you to use your phone as your credentialing device. Everything that we touch helps bring a better tenant experience without breaking the bank.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Realcomm Live. We are so glad to have you with us, and got a great episode in store for you today. We're going to be talking about the Great Resignation and the impact it has on space, and we've got three phenomenal guests, all who've got very specific experience that can help us unpack this topic. Talia Fine, SVP of Information Technology, Tanger Outlets. David Gazek, President, Gazek Consulting, and Amy St. Denis, Principal of Divana Partners. Hey, everybody, how are you?
Great.
Thanks, Howard.
Very good to see and hear you today. So we have an interesting topic, one that we've really never seen before. We're reading about it in the newspapers, and we're hearing about it on news stories, this thing called the Great Resignation. And it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It can be young people, it can be single moms, it can be moms in general, it can be people who don't want to go back to the office because of commutes. But in any event, it's going to impact the real estate industry to some extent. So why don't we start with David? David, if you give a little background of yourself, and then also you're going to reference an article you wrote for us last week, get us started, and then we'll go to Amy and Talia, and then get this conversation started.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Well, I'm an organizational advisor and strategist to CEOs and their leadership teams. We work on issues that involve company vision and values, organizational structure, people, process, and culture. My role is to help leaders diagnose underlying problems, design a tailored process to address them, and deliver customized solutions that get the results they want. I bring a sort of boots on the ground perspective because I come from a real estate industry where over the course of about 30 years, I was a developer, public agency director, and consultant with regional, national, and global companies and organizations. Should I jump in to summarize the article now?
Yep, that'd be great.
So Jim is referencing an article that Realcomm published of mine last week on the Great Resignation and the impact on real estate organizations or real estate occupancy. And the article looks at the Great Resignation through the lens of shifting priorities of the workforce and what that means for real estate and organizational strategies of companies. We all know that resignations have been building for years. They accelerated with the pandemic, and surveys have shown that well over half the workforce was looking for new opportunities this year and was willing to quit without a job. I talk about how the Great Resignation has morphed into the Great Reset of employee attitudes and expectations, from a more compensation-focused mindset to a more experience-focused one. Employees want to learn and grow, have a sense of belonging, and share values with their leaders. But these needs have largely gone unaddressed, and that's what's fueling the Great Resignation. The pandemic proved that working from home works, and it uprooted the office as the centerpiece of work identity. What I mean is it collapsed the boundaries between leaders and teams, work and home, and work time and personal time, creating a paradigm shift in how we think about work. Employees want assurances that align with their experience-focused mindset, and they want more say in defining work patterns to support their well-being. That includes options to work at home or closer to home, offices that prioritize health hygiene, more adaptable work times, workplaces that accommodate different work styles, and even the choice to live in less expensive areas. companies are responding with changes to their real estate strategies. Centralized office hubs are including more suburban spokes. Space planning is incorporating more shared space versus one desk, one person, one office per person. And fixed cost long-term leases are being augmented with variable cost shorter-term leases for co-working flex space to accommodate variability in staffing and where people work. So hybrid solutions, workplace solutions, are the future. But the staying power of the Great Resignation means that varying the workplace alone won't give employees enough reason to stay. I think the message of the article is that leaders must also engage with their employees to better understand what motivates them, what they need to be successful, and then make meaningful changes to their organization and culture that align with an experience-focused mindset. Making that effort along with workplace changes are what will increase retention and what will bring greater stability to the workforce and the workplace.
All really great points, David. And again, when I read the millions of articles that are being written about this, there is no one size fits all to describe what's going on. It's multiple number of different variables. And your article brought up a number of those points. Amy, going to you, you're in the middle of executive recruitment in this industry, and you are literally on the front lines of the conversations, and you know this industry very well. And we build buildings. Henry Ford gave us a vehicle to go from our house to buildings all day long. This thing called the internet and communications comes along and kind of upsets that. And then the pandemic kind of did force us all to do this 2-year work from home experiment. What are you seeing, with the real estate owner and operators you're dealing with as they're trying to understand and deal with this Great Resignation?
Thanks for that, Jim. And David, that was a fantastic article. Thanks for sharing that. I really got a lot out of that.
Thank you.
Jim, I think that there are some differences in product type. I think that, we're seeing probably the biggest kind of reassessment happening on the office side, because that's an area where people, we're obviously going to see some changes, and there's just less people in the office than there were before the pandemic. Comparatively, industrial is on fire. There's an estimate that we're 1 billion square feet short of where we need to be to have the supply chain really working at full force. So that side of the industry is super busy. And the retail side, I think that we've seen a lot of increase in retail, especially on the grocery side and the regional mall side over the last few months. And I think the apartment companies have a huge opportunity right now to provide the kind of services that people need to work from home. So I guess I would say it really just depends on what part, what sector, what asset class we're looking at.
All right. Yeah. And obviously, as we're seeing, industrial, because of supply chain, like you said, is doing great. Talia is going to give us an update on retail, which is doing well. Seems to be office is the main area, but for so many people in their careers, an office has always played a significant role. And now that we're seeing, pre-pandemic, we had utilization rates of about 35 to 40%. During the pandemic, New York City was experiencing, 5 to 10% utilization rates. And now as we're trying to get back in the office, the real question is, what's that utilization rate going to be? And then based on that utilization rate, how's that going to impact demand? How's that going to impact leasing rates, renewing leases, and an awful lot of unknowns in the industry. Talia, why don't you give us a little overview of the retail side of the conversation?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me, Jim. Always a pleasure to be part of Realcomm.
Our pleasure.
And in any way possible. So just a quick overview of Tanger for those of you who are not familiar. Tanger has properties in about 20 states and in Canada, about 13.6 million square feet, over 2,500 stores, and 500 different brand names. So we have different luxury brands such as Armani and Hugo Boss, Tory Burch, contemporary brands, and the like. Within the retail industry specifically, I think we're in a unique point, and we're really seeing our metrics continue to improve. So if we look at things like rents specifically, we've continued to see a positive momentum. Our spreads have improved each quarter this year, and we believe that the continued improvement we're seeing in traffic and sales are going to actually help us sustain this trend. When we look at foot traffic, the foot traffic that we're seeing is really above pre-pandemic level or return to pre-pandemic level. And we're also looking at tenant sales, which have accelerated this quarter to an all-time high for about $448 for us. So we're really seeing great trends. I think it's part of our strategic goals that we've put in place, also part of the fact that we're in the retail industry. And I think that that's been really positive for us. So we're telling a good story. And I think the other piece of it, which I'd like to just touch on, is, we've talked a little bit about returning to the workforce and how that's impacting people. Tanger has done a phenomenal job at hiring talent wherever they are, right? So are in our DNA and at our core, we're looking to hire the best talent wherever they may be. We recently had promoted our COO, Leslie Swanson. She's based in Texas. We hired a chief commercial officer. If you see our press release a few weeks ago, he's based in New York. I myself am based in New York, and we've really done a great job of embracing the new kind of remote workforce and what it means for us specifically. So I think that's also drawn people to Tanger and helped continue telling our positive story.
So it is really good news to hear that your foot traffic is up and sales are up. We talked about a little bit early on that there's all this pent up demand and you're seeing it. But we're also hearing the stories of the Great Resignation impacting retail ability to serve clients, right? That restaurants and retail outlets are losing employees, having trouble retaining them. And yet you said, again, when we were chatting, was that they seem to be getting the job done. Does that mean that the workforce in place is just doing overtime? Any speculation on how they're getting it? We hear one story on one side that says they're short resources, but you're showing great numbers. How do we reconcile that?
We are showing great numbers. It is kind of hard to reconcile. I don't know firsthand if they're putting in longer hours or they're not actually short staffed, but the numbers that we're seeing are really showing that trends are continuing to improve, at least from a retail perspective. And so that's positive news for us, but also positive news for the industry as a whole.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we're going to take a brief break, hear from one of our sponsors, and then we're going to come back and continue this great conversation.
The way we think about the office has changed. When you need to manage dynamic work models, new employee expectations, and keep up with compliance, you need a mobile-first, data-powered strategy and a partner that understands the building of the future because they're inventing it. It's time for real-time visibility over your workforce and your space, so you can track, communicate, plan, and optimize, whether you manage one site or many. Honeywell Sign makes it easy to keep your workforce working, no matter what the future holds.
All right, let's bring back our guests and continue this great conversation. All right, so one of the questions is that the real estate people are asking me, and I'm hearing is, what is the next thing that's going to happen that will give us an idea of the impact of this Great Resignation? And as I mentioned earlier, they keep coming back to the idea of the lease renewals, okay, because that's when people will start making their moves. Let me start with David. David, any idea on when we can see more details, specific details on this Great Resignation? Are people just upgrading their jobs? Are we truly losing folks? Who are we losing? Will they ever come back? When do you think we're going to see some clarity on the Great Resignation so the real estate world, specifically the office, can start understanding what the long-term impacts are?
Well, it's a crystal ball thing to a great extent, right? I think that you have to really look at all the different reasons people are leaving, and there's so much written about it, so many surveys. I think it boils down to the fact that people have options. There's a lot of reshuffling going on, and people want more out of their work. I think we talked about it briefly before the call. People want to see the pandemic gave them a chance to really look at why are they working? What are they getting out of it? Wanting greater purpose, I think, is not just a phrase. It really is something that is driving the Great Resignation. And people want to see how their work connects to the values of the company. They're not just looking for a paycheck anymore. And so leaders, when leaders begin to make the connection between the values of the employee's work, and the purpose of the company, so employees start to get and see more meaning and pride in what they're doing, then their work becomes a craft. And their work becomes a craft in service of a mutually shared purpose with the company. And I think ultimately that's what people are looking for. And so leaders, as they provide a forum where they listen to their employees and they find out what they're looking for and what will make a difference in their level of engagement and commitment, that is what's going to start to turn around the Great Resignation. And essentially, I'm talking about giving employees a voice, a greater voice, a feeling of inclusion in the decision-making of the organization. Basically, when leaders start to put as much effort into retention as they are in recruitment,
Right.
I think we're going to start to see a turnaround in the Great Resignation.
Right. Yep. And in the real estate industry, especially in the real estate tech industry, we have to compete with other, general tech companies. So it makes our industry even harder because we pull from a smaller pool. So we've been talking about retention at Realcomm and IBCOM for as long as the conference has been going on. And Amy, I think you're somewhat of an expert on that. Amy, we were having a good conversation earlier about moms and dealing with schools and COVID. You may want to repeat that for the audience, because I think that's another segment of this Great Resignation, or the hesitancy to go back into the office. Can you share with the audience that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I wanted to say up front, I think that real estate as an organization, real estate organizations are kind of part of financial services overall. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, technology is the area where people are changing the most. Financial services as an industry is actually not that high. I mean, it's a little bit lower. So I think we have some things to be thankful for. But on the other hand, I was just saying, as an individual, most of my friends who have kids under 12 who are in professional roles have had to stay out of the workforce because the school situation has been so tenuous over the course of the last 2 years.
Right.
So if a child is exposed to coronavirus, they have to stay out for 14 days or 10, school days, 14 days total. Now they're saying, well, if we can get them tested every day, they can come back as soon as they test negative. But in this country, we don't have enough tests to do that right now for every school child every day of the school year. So that's going to be a struggle. And I think for a lot of moms, they've just had to make the decision that, they have to stay out until this situation is resolved. So I think that moms in general certainly are a big part of this. And that's at every level of the economy, from entry level all the way up to, top leadership.
Right. And if you think about it, if you watch the major corporations push the back to work dates, I mean, originally it was, summer, and then it was, well, let's get through 4th of July. And that was 2020. And then we went through that whole cycle again in 2021. And here it is 2022. And now we got this Great Resignation hanging over us that is COVID related, but has other attributes as well. And I, at the end of the day, I think it's pretty safe to say the business models have shifted. Now, the big question is, will they boomerang back to what we're used to, or are they forever changed? Talia, I know you're in retail and you don't deal as much with the pressures of the office world, but from your vantage point of seeing people, boomerang back into the malls and wanting to shop, do you think we go back to 2019, or are we forever changed?
I think we're actually forever changed. So I mentioned earlier a little bit about Tanger hiring individuals in different remote areas. We've also recently gone through an exercise where we looked at roles and determined, which role could work remotely, which could be hybrid, which role needs to be in the office, right? I think that's part of what we've done purposefully to maintain and draw key talent, but it's going to be very hard for individuals to go back to pre-pandemic. And I personally don't think that we'll be able to ever go back. I think I did at the beginning. At this point, I think that we've really changed the way we're working forever.
Right. Well, and again, we talk pandemic, we talk all these other issues, but 2-hour commutes, 10 hours a day or a week, I should say, used in more productive, flexible environments, getting kids to school, being more involved, that 10 hours is just wasteful. And as a result, I think you're going to see real estate portfolios morph a little bit. We talked earlier about corporations, and some companies are purchasing ranches and farms and ski lodges to allow teams the flexibility of moving around, work from home here, come into this office a couple days a week. But when you got team projects, you can all head to the ranch. Are any of you hearing those stories starting to develop?
Yes, I've certainly seen a move with that. I have several real estate development groups that are buying properties where they can have a more kind of customized experience where people are a little bit more open and aren't necessarily just in a traditional, 20-story office building in the central business district. I think I've seen also a lot of companies start to look at suburban locations instead of, downtown central business locations. And I think for a lot of the same reasons, coming from Colorado, which is a state, it's a lifestyle state, I've always had people who don't want to drive from one submarket to another because and it's not 2 hours, it could be 45 minutes, but they still have some attitude about that. So that's always been kind of something we've seen. And I've seen, we've just taken on several searches with private equity firms that are buying B and C suburban properties for, value add, with the understanding that those are going to be kind of the next big location. Yep. So I think it's really happening.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the added problems of the major central business districts with crime and social unrest and all the things we're seeing on the news, I think it's funny, we're going back to the suburbs. I mean, how many times I'm going to go through this cycle in my career? And I think that the central business districts, which are now being, the new buzzword I'm hearing is BBD, Better Business District, which is exactly what you just described. But I think it's going to be 5 to 7 years before this cycle could take to flush itself out and get back. So I think flight to the suburbs, flight to non-traditional types of real estate, more work from home. It's all going to contribute to trying to figure out what your portfolio looks like.
Jim?
All right. Yes, David.
Yeah, just to add to that, Jones Lang LaSalle has been projecting that by 2030, 30% of all office space will be co-working and flex. And to underscore why that makes sense is that 50% of lease transactions are for companies with 50 people or less, or who need 5,000 square feet or less. Yep. And that happens to be the sweet spot, for co-working flex.
Nobody's talking about that. Everybody's focusing on the big leases, the big companies, which, believe it or not, are a small percentage of overall leasing activity, and you just nailed it.
So if building owners want to compete for half the market, the active office market, they have to provide flex or co-working space, or they have to do it through third parties.
Right. And that whole WeWork model, which is coming out of its transformation after the Adam Newman era, they've got some interesting new things that we're going to have multiple episodes next year on what the workplace looks like, immersive experiences, integrating online and physical. It's a whole new world. It's a whole new multiple billion-dollar industries are about to be born out of all this. So we got just a minute or two left, 30 seconds each. We'll start with Talia. What advice do you give to a real estate portfolio owner, operator, developer as it relates to taking in everything we're learning in the last 2 years, but focus on the Great Resignation? What advice do you give them going forward on what their real estate portfolio should look like?
I think that the word that David just used is key, and that's exactly what I wanted to hone in on: flexibility, right? So I don't think that everybody's going to go off and work from home forever permanently. I think there does need to be some interaction. Some people thrive on that. Your comment about WeWork earlier, we have, I'm in a WeWork space now, actually, and it provides a lot of flexibility to people. And I think that's
and look at the branding behind you. Brilliant. Yeah. Yep.
But that's the key, right? So if a mom needs to stay home for a day, she can. If you want to be in the office, you can. I think it's that flexibility that's going to really drive people to go to a company and stay with a company.
I think the key to all this is the random collisions that take place in a work environment where some of those most, crazy, creative, innovative ideas pop out, the walk to the coffee room, the lunch table, the unplanned things. I think that's where the online world has to work hard. And then in this hybrid world, when two people would have normally collided with each other, but now one's in on Friday and the other's on Wednesday, that collision doesn't happen. So being together is important.
Yes.
And it's up to all of us to figure out what that blend looks like. Yep. Amy, you want to finish us up? What advice do you give?
Yeah, Talia, I totally agree with flexibility. I think that people need to understand. I also think it's important as an industry that we recognize that since the great downturn in 2008, real estate salaries, compensation has been very flat. So for 13 years, compensation has been relatively flat. I mean, not even cost of living,
Wow.
growth. So at this point, and all that time, productivity increased, and that was across the board. So now we're looking at an employee base who has been through a traumatic experience and said, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Am I living to work or working to live? So I think this is a time when they need greater flexibility. They need greater responsiveness to compensation. We need to be benchmarking a lot more often. I don't know that once a year is going to do it for a while because it's changing so quickly.
You gave me an idea for a whole episode with the data and the stats that you have dealing with recruitment in this industry. Let's go offline and talk about a full episode just on what tea leaves you bring to the table with the data you've got in your possession, because salary and compensation is a good indicator of the future. It really
That'd be
is.
my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, we are unfortunately out of time, everybody. Thank you so much. I know we're getting close to the holidays and we're squeezing this in, but your insight is invaluable. And I really do say thank you for taking the time and being with us today.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Jim.
you.
You have a great holiday season.
You too.
You too.
Be well.
Bye.
All right, with that, let's bring on Lisa, who's covering for Howard today with the news. And Lisa's going to bring us up to speed on what is happening in real estate technology news. And then I'll come back and wrap the show. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Jim. That was a great conversation. So you know that every week we send out our weekly briefing newsletter on the top stories touching commercial and corporate real estate technology. And in this news segment of Realcomm Live, we highlight a few of those articles that we think are especially relevant and interesting. So our lead article this week is about 303 Battery in Seattle, which is the world's first net zero energy high-rise apartment building. If you attended the Realcomm IvyCon conference in Scottsdale last month, you probably heard us talk about this project. We even awarded 303 Battery a Digi Award for Most Intelligent Multifamily Residential Building. The reason this project's so unusual and why it won the Digi Award is not just that it's the first net zero energy residential building, but also that it's a prefabricated modular high-rise tower that's being built and assembled like this huge Lego set. The developer is Sustainable Living Innovations, SLI, and they have created a panelized building system where all of the major parts of the building are manufactured off-site. Each panel, and there are roughly about 900 of them in this building, has a particular function and purpose. So if you crack open one of the panels, what you would see is electrical wiring, plumbing, and mechanical equipment, as well as fiber optic cables. There's less on-site construction work required, so the tower will go up more quickly than a conventionally built building. In fact, they can construct about 2 floors in a single day. The article is pretty detailed and goes through all of the innovative design features of the project, and there are a lot of them. So if you want to read more about it, grab the newsletter from yesterday, and it's also posted on our website. The next article we're featuring this week is about the open office plan. In a focused series of articles covering trends in tenant and workplace experience, privacy is making a comeback. If you'll remember, companies at one time were doing away with private offices for employees and even deleting partitions because they wanted to encourage their workers to collaborate and engage with one another. And it also saved the owners money on the space. But the problem is that no one really liked it. 70% of workers complained about the open work environment. So now, as landlords, and we just had this conversation with Amy, as landlords jump through all sorts of hoops to draw tenants back into the office, privacy is in renewed demand. The article talks about a new company called Room that provides modular office furnishings, many of them designed with interior phone booths and privacy pods that can be moved around where they make the most sense. These are places where somebody can make a personal phone call or enables the sort of work that demands particular levels of concentration. So it appears that freestanding individual work pods are in, and the foosball and keg office environment from a few years ago is out. So this is really an interesting read, so check it out when you have a chance. Also in the news this week, a look at high-performance smart buildings in the cannabis market. The rise of new cannabis products across the country is prompting extraordinary innovation to keep pace with the growing demand. And since energy is 25% of operating costs, a high-performance building is of critical importance. Also, JLL aligns with HQO on a new workplace experience and tenant engagement initiative. And finally, in Israel, robots are building smart homes. So there are several other interesting technology articles in this week's newsletter, in addition to the ones I just mentioned. So take a look in your inbox when you have a chance, or go to the website and click on the news link to access all of these articles. And that's it for me. Jim, I will turn it back over to you.
You know, Lise, I'll tell you, the real estate industry, 30-year debt payments and long construction times has traditionally not liked change. I have not seen as much change I have seen more change in the last 2 years than I have in the last 25.
Right.
And, just listening to those news stories, I mean, those are significant things going on. Getting rid of, open offices and kegs, low voltage buildings that can be assembled like rector sets. These are big movements, and they're not going away. They're not going away.
No, they are. There are some pretty extraordinary things going on and happening at a very rapid pace.
Very rapid. Yep.
Really.
So thank you for a great job for covering for Howard. As I always say, he better watch out.
Yeah.
You're coming after him because you do such a good job.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Be well. Okay. So before we wrap the show, let's hear from our final sponsor, and I will be right back and give you an idea of what's going on in the next week or two.
Places are changing. iOffice has expanded our family of cloud-based software, so you have enterprise solutions that grow with you. We're helping you connect workplace experience and asset management to create a more agile environment for employees and better outcomes for the world.
All right. Well, this will be the last live episode you will see from us in 2021. We are taking a little hiatus for the next couple of weeks, and I know a lot of the industry as well. And we're encouraging folks to take the time over the holidays, get some rest, spend some time with family, be safe, be careful. But to come back into the new year, renewed and ready to go. So what we're encouraging you all to do, you'll be getting some email notices about it, is to watch the last year. We've got episodes, over 50 episodes now, of some of the best topics, the best folks in the industry, all sitting up in that YouTube library, from AI's impact on the real estate industry to low voltage buildings like we just talked about. And we've also got all the footage from our event in Scottsdale. I think we had about 25, 30 episodes from that. So good holiday reading. There's also available as podcasts, so we hope you do that. And then when we do come back after the first of the year, January 7th, we got CAR's indoor air quality program, just absolutely making great strides in setting new standards in indoor air quality inside buildings with Aaron Altzer. And so with that, we say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, great holidays, and we hope you have a restful and exciting holiday season with family and friends, and we will see you after the first of the year. So with that, I say farewell. See you in 2022. Be well.